Hey y'all, Chad Siebold here with Redox Bionutrients. Miss Aim,
How you
happy
doing?
holidays.
Hollering from Boston today. We're getting ready for Christmas.
Ho ho ho. What, 3 days out?
Yeah, we actually got a little snow today too.
So we're gonna be dry here, and guess what? Doesn't matter. Santa Claus is coming to my house because I've been good all year long. Hey, we're excited. We've got a lot of cool stuff to show, and I know it's been a long time. Aim, you've been working your butt off to get a lot of the results from this season. I think what we're going to do is like a high level, quick kind of what have we seen this year? Where was our successes? Where were we challenged? And kind of share that with you. Aim, excited to have you here today.
Yeah, I'm excited to kind of download guys on what we're seeing in the field in regards to RDX-N. It's one of our most talked about products this year. You know, we were talking about earlier that farmers vote with their dollars, right? They want to put products on the field that work and that give them increase their revenue overall. And we've got results that we can talk a little bit about today. That's really exciting. We've got 83% win rate right now coming in the field, and yeah, we can dive in.
Listen, I'm going to tell you right now, right? You mentioned it. Producers do vote with their dollars. We had an amazing season. So first off, thank you to the growers this year that trusted us on their farm to be able to utilize products that maybe they weren't necessarily familiar with or didn't believe in initially. RDX-N is a great technology. It's something that I discovered a few years ago when working with Total Acre. We're going to talk about some Total Acre members that did some trials with us too, including Alex Harrell, which if you don't know Alex, he's a soybean yield champ, but did some really cool stuff with you out in corn this year. But it is all about trusting new technology that works. And in your backdrop there, it talks about achieving plant charge balance. That's the fundamental of Redox and really the RDX-N technology.
We've been commercial for a couple years with RDX-N, but we've been working with this technology for over 10 years. I mean, so we've got it dialed in when we talk about rate and timing.
You talk about 10 years, but we were out there. We were in Burley, Idaho, where the headquarters is. We were talking to Darren. He's like, well, actually, we kind of discovered some cool stuff about 20 years ago, and then the last 10 years really commercially been putting in things in the product in the marketplace. 3 years ago is when we introduced the product in the marketplace for the Midwest. So it's been around longer than you think. I call it the best kept secret in agriculture, Redox Bionutrients. Let's jump into some cool stuff. So when you talk about the history and the heritage of the company, I know you've been out talking on different speaking arrangements along the way, but over 32 years of experience. I know that when I met Darren this first time, he talked about telling the truth, find the best people, everything else falls into place. When you start, I guess, talking about results, it's easy to talk about, but the producers that are out there voting with their dollars, number one, and then putting more acres out this year, that's what's exciting.
Absolutely, and you mentioned Total Acre, so we've been working with those guys. We're going on our third year. Actually, we just put together trial protocols for 2026 as we're wrapping up 2025, and we've got some really good data coming out of the Midwest with RDX-N with some of our Total Acre members. So we can talk a little bit about that if we want to go dig into it.
And I would like to maybe just highlight some of the stuff that we've done with them, just because Brian and Bryce take a really, I would call it a systematic approach to how they pull data in. So again, this is their data, not our data. We're going to show some different screenshots that you can kind of see. We understand on your farm is where it makes the most impact, but most of the folks, guys, want to know win rates. You already mentioned it's similar to Michael Jordan's free throw all-time shooting percentage, which is about 83.5% right now, which is crazy. We talk about anything over 60% being really good. Maybe not in free throws, but in winning as far as efficacy. I think the challenge becomes is where do we, great, where do we not win, right? And we'll talk about that too. But when you talk about the systematic approach to producing, a crop, you have to have checks and balances along the way to make sure that how did it work, why did it work, all those things. That's why we like working with Total Acre growers. Educating the marketplace on the technology, right? So yeah, we are, from a biostimulant standpoint, we're one of the oldest companies in the business, one of the most experienced in globally, really. And again, whether it's turf, ag, tree nut fruits, you can look up the credentials. But when you start looking at technology specific to RDX-N, let's talk about that, Aim.
Yeah, so liquid product, right? Comes in 2.5 gallon jugs, and we're talking for guys that are growing corn, 16 to 32 ounces per acre. It's not a lot of product. And so unlike other nutrient use efficiency products where the mode of action to increase nitrogen optimization, right, is soil-based, right? It's a bug in a jug, it's a sugar, it's a nitrogen stabilizer. This is one of the only, if not the only, nitrogen optimization tool in your toolbox, that the mode of action is actually inside the plant. And what I mean by that is in season when you're applying nitrogen, right, whether it's synthetic or whether it's manure, plant's going to take that nitrogen in, it's going to metabolize it inside the cell. And what RDX-N actually does is it increases the plant's ability to metabolize that nitrogen more efficiently. So you've got some flexibility there, and we'll see that in our trial data that we talk about, is whether guys are pretty efficient, pretty lean, right? We talk about nitrogen use efficiency. How many units of nitrogen per bushels? Am I a 1-to-1 and I'm going for yield? We've got some examples of that. Or am I pretty optimized? I'm at a 0.7, 0.6, 0.5. Well, what we can do inside the plant is we can increase that metabolic efficiency of nitrogen, whether we're working with a little or we're working with too much.
I love it. And I think, that's as tech as I want to get into some of the system and product, but I think it's awesome to hear. Again, we are a lot different than anything else that's out in the marketplace. It is about efficiency and how do we make more of that investment in fertility more available to the plant. Jumping right into some really cool stuff. I'm going to, Alex Harrell's a good friend of mine. Alex and I have done some interesting things when I was with Total Acre, yield champ, over 200 bushel soybeans. What we did on his farm was in corn, right? And we worked with Caleb Traw and some of the things they're doing with how do we grow better corn with, how do we increase the efficiency of our, fertility investment. One of the things that's interesting there, again, without getting into the weeds, Aim, you might talk high level on some of that in a minute, but I know that Alex went out with a 1-to-1. So if you're an NUE guy and you're looking at total pounds of nitrogen, I think it was 200, yield goal was 200 bushel. He's grown 200 bushel beans, but he's grown 200 bushel corn too. Wild to me. But 200 bushel corn with 200 units of N, that's a 1-to-1 NUE. He went out on top with a pint and seen some amazing results. I know most of it, the replicated trials they did was anywhere from 5 to 23 bushel lifts. Aim, why did we do that this year?
Yeah, so we went in, like I said, talking to Alex, he did not want to back off any nitrogenol, right? Like he's going for upside on yield and quality. In this particular field, Smithville, Georgia, under pivot, lighter ground, lower CECs, planted late, so we were already under tough conditions. And so what we wanted to do in this trial is compare rates and timings. So we did 16 ounces in furrow. We did a split application, 16 ounces in furrow, and then another 16 ounces at Y drop, and then just a 16 ounces at Y drop. And I'll tell you, we're out in the field at his field day in August, and we were pulling some ears from these rows, and we were able to see the differences over the grower standard right away. And the cool part is, again, even at that 1-to-1 NUE, we were seeing almost a 21 bushel lift at that Y drop application, talking 16 ounces, $12 to the acre, and a 21 bushel lift. So massive wins there right out of the gate. And, they had shared with us, there were multiple products in that field. We were the best performing, most consistent product.
Yeah, shout out to Alex and Caleb for doing that too. I know that's not a traditional kind of CRO trial, but it's farmer grade, which we love. So again, if you get a chance, even if you're a vendor, if you get a chance to go check out what Caleb and Alex are doing, it's a pretty cool setup. I will tell you, they've got some challenging fields down there, lighter soils, like you said, lower CECs. I think when you start looking at some of the other stuff across the board, so that's Georgia. Let's go up to Illinois. I know we work with Matt and Mark up at Severson Ag, and one of the things they do very well is they start fine-tooth combing everything. We started to put RDX-N. I'll let you talk a little bit about the research and the results. But when you start talking about the ability to do things on really heavy ground in Illinois versus Georgia, where does it work best? Where have you seen?
Yeah, I would say yes, right? That's a non-answer, but we've got trial data coming in from lighter ground, from southern Georgia, like you said, from heavier ground to central Illinois, to the precision planting PTI farm research. That was a high management ground, right? It's really tough to get those extra bushels from dry ground to manure ground. So like, I'll just give you a quick example here. If we pull up Larson Farms, which is a total acre trial, this is in Creston, Nebraska, right? Very, very optimized, very lean. So his total nitrogen is under a 0.6. It's heavy manure ground here. So he replaced 33 pounds of his nitro, mag acid, and elemental N. We were still able to get 4.5 bushels, even with that replacement. And I think the takeaway from there is that the guys that are pretty optimized and want to continue to get leaner and leaner, there's not a lot of tools in the toolbox, right? A lot of these other products kind of cap out at a certain amount of pounds per acre if you want to use pounds, right? Mm-hmm. But if you think about, again, what RDX-N is doing inside that cell of that plant, it's increasing metabolic efficiency of the nitrogen that you're providing it.
Because he wasn't necessarily, he's a little bit different than Alex, right? He was okay with reducing nitrogen and still had a 4 bushel lift. I think he said over 30 pounds of N replaced or reduced with a 4 bushel lift. Now go back to PTI, because I heard just say something.
Okay.
Precision. I'm jumping all over, right? From Nebraska. We have a short amount of time. Let's get as much as we can in here. But when you start talking about PTI, working with Jason Webster, I think he was essentially, kind of frustrated with some of that space that was in UE, right? Nitrogen use efficiency type space. Your relationship with him and the way we approach things is different, right? We're not talking about, like you said, bugs in a jug or some of the other things that are out in the marketplace. You're talking about a biostimulant, very low use rates that can help metabolize nitrogen. And you talk about moving energy. That's what had Jason interested. Talk about PTI.
Yeah, so located in Pontiac, Illinois, right? So we actually did 3 different type of protocols. First was a high management field. We actually did RDX-N in addition to 2 of our foliar products, which you'll see here. And the big story here on the high management is we were still able to get bushels, even in an area where how much more wiggle room do you really have, right? You move that to your corn over corn study where he actually replaced 50 pounds of nitrogen. And what I liked about this trial is he actually took a strip and actually pulled back that 50 pounds to show what the negative impact of that nitrogen was a limiting yield factor. So you've got the grower standard that you'll see here, you've got your minus 50 pounds, and then look at what RDX-N does. I mean, we were able to maintain yields on that one at 190 units, which is incredible. So the economics right there definitely checks the box, and massive amount, right? The ability to be able to pull back, 50 pounds with he did 16 ounces of RDX-N at planting.
So I think that's interesting, right? Because it's different strokes, different folks. I think when you talk about guys like my dad, like, I'm not going to reduce anything. If you can have a yield pop, that was more the Alex scenario, right? The Alex Harrell and Caleb Truck. It was already late. We didn't get in there. But now you just talked about PTI. They were all about stressing corn. I think that was over 300 bushel corn, by the way, too, right? With that 50 pounds. It's not that we say that you have to reduce, by the way, you guys, right? So I talked about, maybe it was a loaded question. I said, where does it work best? You can optimize your nutrients by saying we're going to do more with less, right? You can definitely do that. But then if you have an existing program that you feel like we can fit into, we can do that as well. And RDX-N at a pint rate is $12 MSRP, farm gate. So, I mean, price-wise, you can put it into that system fairly affordably. But here's what I'm going to tell you. You can't afford not to. When you start looking at the cost of fertility, right? And you look at, I don't care what form of nitrogen you use, you look at the efficiency of that nitrogen, we know not 100% gets used, right? Whether it's an anhydrous form, 32, 28 dry, it doesn't matter. There's a certain percentage that any university or any grower is going to attach to that. If you say you're 50% efficient with 200 pounds, that means the plant's only using 100 pounds. What RDX-N does is it takes and makes that other that goes away more available to the plant and using that, right? So now we can help metabolize. It's no different than your body, Amy. I know you use that analogy quite a bit.
Yeah. And I will say, like you said, 83% win rate. Where do we not win? We mentioned like when there's an over application of nitrogen, we're not really making a dent. I will say in that precision planting, that corn over corn and corn over beans, we were flat, right, at that full rate. But if that field wanted for nothing, right? I mean that was irrigated. So, but if you compare that to the integrated ag services.
Oh, shoot, yeah, Ohio, yeah, we get.
Yeah, so integrated ag services, which I have up here. So this is Central Ohio. So did not replace either, right? So high management, 206, I think 200 plus pounds of nitrogen. The crop consultant was like, we're not replacing anything. We want to go for yield. So again, we had some wins at that 1-to-1 on the PTI. It was flat, but if you can see in this result here, we actually increased by, what did we get? 7.5 bushels. But so why was that? What I would say is interesting. If you were in Central Ohio this past year, the rain shut off the 3rd week of July. So that plant was under massive stress. If you look at the graph here on the screen, it's, stress days were through the roof, no rain. That energy system of that plant was basically, compared to the grower standard, the RDX-N treated plant was able to move that energy where it needed. And so we think about driving efficiency inside the plant, driving metabolic efficiency, when we can kind of free that up so that the plant can do what it's supposed to do, it allows the plant to bring energy into other areas to be able to combat that abiotic stress. I think it's similar to Alex's farm, right? Because it's on lighter ground, lower CECs, that at that 1-to-1 that we can actually really see some big gains because that plant is under stress.
Yeah, I think that's it, right? It's the movement of energy. And I think when you start talking about that, I mentioned Severson Ag with Mark and Matt. One of the things that Total Acre does really well, and again, if you're a tissue sample guy, great. If you're a SEP guy, it doesn't matter to us. At the end of the day, you can test and do whatever you want on your side. But what we've seen is they do something with they call it nutrient power rankings. It's a lot of tissue sampling. And what they couldn't explain was the movement of energy. Where we're always chasing ratios, right? We're always saying, gosh, we're short of this, we need to apply it. We make an application, we're moving energy in the plant, you guys. And what's happening, or what we've seen with some of the stuff that Mark and Matt have done, is like all season long we stay green. Now, why is that, Amy? We're moving energy. The plant's doing its job, right? We don't need to make an application here or there and move that energy. And what it does, and again, I want to reiterate this just for everybody here, if you can move energy to production instead of correcting stress, that equates to yield, right? The quicker we can do that, the better off we are, right? So in season up front, we want to see at least a pint with your starter, or a pint in furrow is where we'd like to see that. We have some other options, but at the end of the day, the quicker we can do it, the better off we are. If you're looking for a rate, we want at least a pint out there. We kind of like to, and Aim, I'll let you talk a little bit about this, but we talk about charge per acre. We don't talk about pounds per acre, but you might talk a little bit, Aim, about that 0.9 or below. And then if we're in a heavier environment, you might look at increased dosage.
So if you're at that 0.9 nitrogen use efficiency or above, we would recommend a 32-ounce rate. So what I have you think about is how much nitrogen am I putting out and when? Because if I'm putting 50, 60, 70 pounds of nitrogen out all at once, that plant system's getting overloaded. And if you're not going to replace in that scenario, this is where we'd recommend that you'd put in that RDX-N, again, whether it's 16 or 32. So you have the flexibility to flex that rate, but really, again, you think like just common sense, right? If I'm overloading the system, I need to give the plant the assist at that time.
And Aim, when you say overloading, it's no different. That stored energy, plants have to take up nitrogen, stored in the leaf vacuole. And if we are in a situation where the plant's been overapplied, again, we have to take it up. What happens when we take in too much food, right? Stored fat, energy that's not being usable, right? That's damage that's caused to our bodies. It's no different than a plant, right? It is a damaging, or it is stressful to the plant to have too much nitrogen. That's where RDX-N works, right? So now the sudden we can either maneuver that energy away from the plant that's causing the stress, or actually consume that. I think one interesting one, like Brand Farms down in Missouri, that was one that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
You talked about a guy that was in an interesting situation, right? Necessarily want to pull back nitrogen, but he replaced ATS. And so you're looking at other nutrients, sulfur, right? Do you have the numbers up in front, right? There you go.
Yeah, so this is Glasgow, Missouri. He did a split application, 8 ounces in furrow. You'll see it here on the screen, 16 ounces wide drop, 0.87 nitrogen use efficiency, so kind of right in the middle there. But replaced almost 10 gallons of his ATS. And we were thinking, oh, shoot, we're going to take a hit, right? Because we're not just replacing straight nitrogen, we're replacing sulfur. But one of the things that RDX-N specifically does is it increases nutrient efficiency in sulfur. And we've seen that. You mentioned Severson Ag's tissue tests. We don't have time in this presentation, but consistently, we've seen tissue test results come up on all levels in our RDX-N trials coming out of the Midwest this year. Why is that? It's because we're creating that charge balance, that electrical charge balance, right? We're priming that energy system, allow that plant to come fully back online, right? And at that point, it solves its own problems, right? It's able to bring all of the efficiency up. And I truly believe that's one of the reasons why, even with almost 10 gallons of replacement, right, we were still able to get a 13 bushel increase. So I show guys these results. They're like, well, wait a minute, 13 bushels. I go, no, that's increase, right? They're like, well, why is that? It's charge balance.
So it's generating revenue, right? So we talk about, I know Total Acre talks about this quite a bit, as ROI, maximizing ROI, right? Production potential, all those kind of things, yield potential. Now, one thing in this marketplace you have to look at is, you just talked about it, ATS. I think it was, if I look at the numbers, it's around 10 gallons of ATS. So yeah, pulling back sulfur, pulling back nitrogen. So you're pulling 13 to 15 pounds. You guys know the cost of ATS locally. So there's 10 pounds, there's a savings there, right? So you're talking ROI and cost per bushel. Not only that, but then being able to maximize yield by talking about a 13 bushel lift on top of that. This is real results, you guys, that when you start talking about generating revenue, that's what it's about, keeping the lights on. And these marketplaces, we have to do something different. Redox is there for a solution, right? So let me say that again. Redox is there for a solution, right? We've been around for 32 years. We've been doing this in tree nut fruit specialty. Really, here in the Midwest, you probably hadn't heard of us. And if you hadn't, you better ask somebody. RDX-N is something that you have a chance to vote with your dollars this year. You have a chance to vote also with the Farm Journal Product of the Year. We'd appreciate the vote. One of the things I love about it, right, in this marketplace, every farm's a little bit different, every grower's a little bit different, every program's a bit different, every soil type, everything, right? But when you start looking at opportunities, I know you kind of drew up some cool stuff around like the economics. Most times, these days when you're talking fertility works, the logistics, low use rates, and some of the things we're doing, then the agronomics, right? I would challenge anybody out there in terms of superiority of agronomically, what we're doing inside of the plant with our science, right, is unmatched. There's nobody doing anything around plant charge balance. Now, I will tell you, RAM technology, right, we haven't mentioned it much, but redox active molecules is the technology behind most of our products. That allows that plant to be able to take on or receive charge, right? And moving of energy, RAM, if you remember nothing else, right? That's my one thing, Amy. RAM technology allows that plant to be able to take up or move charge. Those are two things that are very important in the technology. Amy?
Yeah, so I would add to that, we explained what RDX-N does inside the cell. RAM technology is how it's accomplished, right? It's the engine that makes that work, right? It's the ability to be able to give or take a charge inside the plant, acting like a shock absorber to immediately create plant charge balance, and that helps with nutrient efficiency. It helps with the bioavailability as we stack that biostimulant with nutrition, like you said, in all of our products. So it immediately gets to work, and we've seen that from our tissue tests, the results in the field, RNA analysis. I mean, we've got so much data. We haven't even scratched the surface in this call, right? We haven't even talked about the manure trials that are coming in right now that are just, the efficiency that RDX-N can do even just with manure. It's great. But like a little product can go a long way because you've got that RAM technology bottled up with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the oldest biostimulant companies in the world, you guys. When you start talking, 30 years, over 30 years of experience, it doesn't seem like that's possible that that's one of those oldest in the industry, but it's a new technology that's, again, only 30 years old. When you start looking at our ability to be able to do things differently, we're excited to be on your operations to be able to provide solutions this year. I think you'll find that this is a privately held company focused on results, working with customer and trying to find successful solutions on your operation. A couple different things that I want to just touch on here. We've been replacing starter fertilizer as well for the last 15 years with the product. Again, these are things we've been doing for quite some time. I'd encourage you to reach out to a local dealer, one of the Total Acre guys if you know them, ask for more results. Amy, we've got a lot of cool stuff online.
Yeah, so if you want to learn more about RDX-N, I would recommend going on Redox Grows /Midwest. Also, if you go to our homepage, the first thing you're going to see is to go out and vote for RDX-N New Product of the Year by Farm Journal. Like, you have time to vote between now and the end of the year. So as you're wrapping Christmas presents and you're drinking your eggnog, click on our website. We'd appreciate the vote.
Yeah, and I guess my last little thing here is vote with your dollars too. There's still time to lock in some early orders at the end of the year. So if you're not voting at Product of the Year, thanks Farm Journal for that. Again, I think that's from our peers as well. Thank you for the vote. But at the end of the day, if you're wanting to vote with your dollars and put some product in this year, we've got some solutions for you. Check us out online at redoxgrows.com. Looking forward to working with you this year.